Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good time with the sessions that you have attended so far. I understand the one before this was particularly interesting with the first university that got CMMC compliant, and we're very proud that it was with PreVeil. I'd like to welcome you now to our next session on implementing CMMC compliance within higher education. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Laura Elkin, who's the Director of Restricted Research at the University of Cincinnati. Laura brings over 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity and information technology, spanning higher education, K through 12 environments, and private industry. She specializes in NIST cybersecurity assessments and risk management. She's passionate about collaborating with diverse teams to identify creative solutions to reduce cyber risk. At the University of Cincinnati, Laura oversees export control, which I think is ITAR, and controlled unclassified information projects, working closely with researchers to meet cybersecurity requirements for grants and contracts. She's also partnering with the CISO of UC to lead the UC's efforts towards achieving CMMC compliance and certifications. So our discussion today will delve into the University of Cincinnati's approach to CMMC compliance. We'll explore their strategic decisions, implementation steps, and the tools that they have employed. This session aims to provide valuable insight for Laura's peers, who are the senior IT and compliance professionals from over 75 universities in attendance today. So a warm welcome to you, Laura.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I think it's going to be a great session for your peers. So let's start with the basics, which is an overview of UC's CMMC compliance program. Laura, could you start by providing an overview of the program, specifically who does it cover, and what is the scale and scope of your initiative?
So, University of Cincinnati has $378 million in research funding. Approximately 78% of that is federal funding, with a portion of it being Department of Defense funding, which is covered under the CMMC clauses and likely will be receiving them in the future. Generally, our research for CMMC covers our engineering department and applied sciences, our arts and sciences department, specifically our political science, and also our medical department. So we have quite a bit of DoD funding in our medical department. So it does cover a broad swath, and we anticipate encouraging our users and our researchers to reach out to the DoD and be creative in their proposals from all departments.
Interesting. So tell us a little bit, are you familiar with, it's an eclectic group from political science to medical to, the sciences. Any sort of insights into the sorts of work that UC is doing? It sounds very interesting from a research perspective.
So we have a lot of aerospace, and that covers everything from hypersonics and wind tunnels to also space exploration and space management. Got a whole bunch of satellites up there, and somehow they have to get repaired, brought down, etc. On the medical side, University of Cincinnati does support the DoD with training of medical professionals in the DoD, specifically Army, Air Force, etc. So we're very closely affiliated with University UC Health. So a lot of our medical faculty members are duly appointed, which means they are both faculty members as well as doctors over in the hospital. So the DoD will reach out to us, and we'll come up with some very interesting projects, whether it is regarding how we manage blood, donations and how that gets transported all the way to various other areas such as neuroscience.
It's always fascinating for me to hear, these basic things, yet very sophisticated things like transfer of blood. I mean, it not only is obviously important to the DoD for the war scenarios, but in general, it has broad application to, the well-being of society at large. So I'm thrilled and, happy to hear about the range of projects. And of course, it doesn't surprise me, being from Ohio, that you have a strong aerospace and defense, component over here. Laura, one of the things that's very unique about UC is that you had made a strategic alignment with NIST 800-171 well in advance of CMMC. So, could you share with us what was the strategic thinking behind aligning all compliance efforts at the university with 800-171 before the introduction of CMMC? And how has this alignment influenced your approach to compliance, both for DFARS 7012 and for CMMC?
Certainly, I am actually going to share with you a PowerPoint that I've got that shows a Venn diagram. So this is a Venn diagram that really supports our decision to pick NIST 800-171. University of Cincinnati is required through various laws and regulation to be compliant with a variety of frameworks. And a lot of them have commonalities, but they don't align perfectly. After some evaluation, we identified that NIST 800-171 covers not only CMMC and DFARS, but it covers a significant swath of the other frameworks that we're required to. So by aligning our policies, aligning our procedures and standards, and just our overall strategy for information security and compliance with NIST 800-171, we have taken a huge stride forward with managing all the other frameworks as well as CMMC. So this provided us with a solid baseline so that when we have to be compliant in certain areas with FOPA or GLBA or GDPR or even PCI, we were able to build on a solid framework that was already built with NIST 800-171. And this helps us with our compliance by not having to reinvent the wheel all the time. One of the things that can be frustrating is trying to find that overlap and not have to have special policies, special procedures for each one of the frameworks. It's not a 100%. Of course, there's going to be special procedures for certain frameworks, but NIST 800-171 really pushed us really far. The other thing that was nice about NIST 800-171 is that it's not just IT. So we're able to use this framework to help enhance compliance collaboration across the university. So, for instance, one of the things that's easy to pick out of NIST 800-171 is managing your personnel. A lot of times we think about managing personnel as onboarding, offboarding. But the other part of that is making sure that you are checking your personnel at an appropriate time frame for background checks. Now, in some areas of the university, you have a much lower risk and the background checks can be limited. But with CMMC, you have to do more. So by having NIST 800-171 as our baseline, we're able to establish a process for that. So we've got CMMC and all the other stuff.
It's just such a smart, it's a very thoughtful way of approaching things. You establish, using a very robust framework like 800-171, a baseline for the entirety of your programs. Because let's admit it, I mean, most of these programs are attempting to achieve the same outcomes, which is they want basically the information to be protected, the right policies and procedures, the training, and so forth. And so by sort of aligning your program around 800-171, you've got a wonderful sort of baseline that you can leverage and also get not to start from scratch when other frameworks are desired for whatever reason. So I always found that fascinating, and I think that the audience will probably appreciate this kind of very simple but nonetheless very significant step that UC took. Let's delve in now into the key implementation steps for CMMC. Could you walk us through the steps and phases that UC has taken in its journey towards CMMC compliance, Laura?
Certainly, the first part was definitely getting leadership buy-in. CMMC is not a small effort, and when you look at it, it does appear to be a small subset of research. Especially when we started this, it was a much smaller subset for us. But one of the things that we highlighted were not only the benefits of us being compliant and making sure that we stayed on compliance path by being able to keep the funding that we have, but also being able to get future funding. So that helped get some of the buy-in. But we also reminded them that CMMC is a serious endeavor, and the False Claims Act is not something that's just a piece of paper being waved around. That actually has been being implemented. We've seen several cases in the news that have had some significant impact, and it's a risk that we needed to make sure that we were aware of and managed properly. So once we had the buy-in and the leadership agreed that we would move forward, it was important that we took that one step further. So we developed a steering committee that oversees NIST 171. Rather than calling it the CMMC steering committee, we called it NIST 171, which us to further push that compliance effort across the university. That steering committee is truly the leaders, the movers and shakers, and the decision makers at the university. Our goal with that is not to have them boots on the ground doing the work, but making decisions and communicating. We would take the work that needs to be done and the work that is being done, share our celebrations, share our concerns, and share the decisions that we needed leadership to make. For instance, we needed leadership to make the decision to invest in an AWS enclave, and that was the committee that made that decision for us. They helped us by taking ownership and communicating our goals. But they also help us by communicating our celebrations. This is a lot of work. This is a lot of man hours, blood, sweat, and tears, however you want to phrase it. They helped us celebrate. We were able to put together just a quick PowerPoint that they could take to their leadership and so that people could see all the good work that the university is doing. But this also included departments you may not think about. Legal, pretty obvious. HR, public safety, um, health and human safety, the groups that help us with some of those oddball little compliance tasks. And we were able to move things forward. They really enabled us to collaborate across the university and make this no longer just an IT problem. So once that was put together, we then moved to getting our feet wet and really working through the nitty-gritty of getting the environment set up, getting the documentation put together, getting the policies polished up, aligned with the compliance framework, and really moving towards that compliance effort. Where we are now is that we have our environment, we have a physical space. We've actually built a special physical location for our CMMC environment. And we are preparing for our gap assessment just to make sure that we've got all of our T's crossed, all of our I's dotted, And then once that's over, we will move towards certification.
Well, it's wonderful to hear, the sort of step-by-step methodical approach that you took. And again, we're excited to see the results of your gap assessment and confident that you're going to do great with that and also with your certification. So I want to move to next the IT systems and tools utilized. What IT systems and tools are you utilizing? You mentioned AWS for your compliance effort. And specifically, how does PreVeil fit into your overall strategy? Now, normally I never ask about, PreVeil, but Laura, you had mentioned that you're being inundated with other universities asking you, listen, how do I get compliant, etc. So we feel that, in the context of, again, being helpful to your peers, we sort of gently are bringing PreVeil in, and it's just for this question. So tell us a little bit about your um, tools and a bit about PreVeil and how it fits in.
So we have a variety of tools that we already had in place for our information security program. We have leveraged those tools such as CrowdStrike, Splunk. I mentioned AWS. We have all of those in place, and we do use PreVeil for our email and file sharing capabilities. Um, we actually had that in place coming up on 2.5, 3 years now.
Oh,
Time really flies. Um, so our faculty members have found that it's easy to onboard with, and it's also useful when we have large projects. For instance, I have a project right now that has five sub entities, and we use PreVeil to help share the files amongst those entities, and it gives them the level of confidence. So that's only one part of our CMMC compliance. And with the whole package together with the documentation, that does give us what we feel to be a comprehensive environment.
so it's interesting that you're also using one of the capabilities that we provide, which is not only protecting your CUI to be compliant, whether it's in emails or files, but also with the free accounts, etc. Sort of communicating with other organizations and other entities is a capability that it appears you're using to your benefit.
Yes, it is beneficial, and we have found that it has been reasonably accepted. Um, and those that do not wish to use it have offered us their option as well. So it's all about being flexible and figuring out what works best for the individual project.
Excellent. You mentioned the second important aspect, other than IT systems and tools, is documentation. So, my next question focuses on your documentation strategy. What is your strategy for managing and maintaining the necessary documentation to demonstrate compliance with CMMC? Tell us about it in a little bit of detail. Like, how did you assemble it? What tools do you use, etc.?
So we are currently still onboarding our GRC tool. So right now we have a file share that we are using that stores all of our data. But what has been really helpful and important is one particular document that identifies for each and every control, uh, the 110 plus the breakout of 171A. We've identified who owns that control, who operates that control, where the document is, and how we get the evidence for that.
Interesting. And so you'll be also using like a GRC tool then to kind of put everything together. I'm presuming that's something that you'll be doing before you do your gap assessment, or will you go with your current documentation set um, and then build the GRC later?
We will go with our current documentation until that is up. And we just recently switched our GRC tools and are still building that.
Mhm.
So it is currently it's just in a final share.
which is again, testament that there are many ways to kind of do this. Tell us about who are the folks that sort of wrote the documentation. Were you using internal folks, or were you using external, consulting help to write the docs?
So we were fortunate as part of our AWS engagement. AWS assisted us with the documentation of our SSP.
Hmm.
They were able to document all of the work that they did and helped us format it in a way that the lead there believes would be helpful for the C3PAOs. And then from there, we were able to expand it. So it was a combination of internal and external resources. But I have a partner in our information security office who helps me write the documentation. And then we leverage our SMEs who they know much more about the technical side than I do. And we work with them to make sure that we have the proper documentation for the individual controls. The important thing is that I can write all I want, but we've got to make sure it's correct. And the people who implemented that are the people who know how to write that out. So it truly is a team effort. While yes, I certainly was leading the effort, it was not done exclusively by me. It is a team effort across the board.
I think what you pointed out that's interesting is that AWS, for example, provided you with necessary documentation that was aligned to their offering, and it's something that we take very seriously. So at PreVeil, we have this thing called an accelerator, where for all 110 controls, we provide thorough documentation on how the control is met, how the shared responsibility works. But also, we took the step of having that pre-validated by C3PO. So we took the docs, showed them the PreVeil system and the docs, got it pre-validated. And again, this sort of is a strategy which it looks like, you're benefiting from by leaning on the vendors to go provide, appropriate pre-vetted documentation to kind of simplify the compliance journey. And it's not something that many people are aware of. So thank you for sharing for your peers. Let's move on to the assessment planning. You mentioned in your earlier remarks that you go for a gap assessment. Are there any specific timelines or milestones that you've set to prepare for the gap assessment and then the eventual CMMC assessment?
So we've spoken with our gap assessor. It's going to be about a 12-week assessment. We intend to start mid-June, and from there, we looked for vendors that are very focused on following the CMMC CAP process, which is the assessment process for just our gap assessment. That way, it's in essence a dry run for the certification. So we will start with the process of scoping the environment, making sure that we all are in agreement on what we have scoped the environment to be, making sure that we have all of our documentation. We will provide that to the vendor, make sure that they have everything that they need, and then they will from there determine if we're missing anything. Just like with the CAP, do they have everything they need to move forward? Difference between the certification and the gap assessment. Gap assessment will continue to move forward, noting the gaps. At that point, we'll do the interviews, do the checking of the evidence, however necessary. And from there, we'll see how our gap assessment comes out.
What's really smart about, how you're doing things over here, one, standardizing on 800-171 before, but also using the gap assessment in a thoughtful way, which is many people think, oh, let's do a gap assessment, then basically go and implement. Whereas what I think we find more helpful is the way you're doing it, which is go execute your program to the best of your ability. Once you got the foundations, then do a gap assessment to see if there are any gaps at that point. And so the gap assessment in that context actually serves as really a dry run for an assessment. So I'm kind of appreciative of the thoughtful steps that UC is taking. So thank you for sharing. Um, let's move on, Laura, to the general lessons that you have learned that you think could be beneficial for your peers that are either embarking on the journey or are in a similar stage to where you are.
Biggest lesson that we have taken away from this is the importance of collaboration across the university. And it is very easy to look at NIST 171 and toss it over and say it's an IT problem. Unfortunately, it's not. It is more than an IT problem. It is something that requires multiple areas of the university. Having a steering committee that encompasses all of those areas, that encourages their departments to work with us and leads their department in the collaborative effort is important. That's really made the difference for us. I have a very unique situation where I have an IT background and I actually sit in the Office of Research. Um, I function in compliance. I cover all the compliance aspects, but I also have the knowledge of IT and can talk with the IT team. And I work very closely with the IT teams, including the Office of Information Security, to drive all of this. So having somebody who can help lead that, who understands the technical side of it, but also understands the compliance side of it, can be very beneficial.
Well, it's always helpful to have a multifaceted background because it is a complex, thing that's looking at policies, procedures, IT. And as you said, if people miss it, you mentioned in your earlier comments about False Claims Acts. It turns out, I don't know if you were aware, an earlier session we had the actual attorneys that prosecuted the Georgia Tech, case providing their insights on, how the False Claim Act works and whistleblowing works. So it's kind of nice that they have really empowered individuals like yourselves who have a breadth of understanding of IT, compliance, and policies and procedures so that there's full awareness of what you've signed up to do versus sort of inadvertently even making, errors. I'm going to move to my very last question. I could go on and on over here, but one of the topics that comes up very often, Laura, as you're aware, is balancing compliance with academic freedom. So, in the context of UC, how do you balance the stringent requirements of compliance with the need to maintain academic freedom and open collaboration?
One of the things that's important to recognize is that compliance with frameworks has a scope to it. So CMMC and NIST 171 as a baseline framework for our policies works well. As a baseline implementation across the university is excessive. Um, so applying the framework where it's appropriate and not applying it where it's inappropriate is very beneficial. Collaboration is important, even critical to research. So remembering that what the limits of the compliance framework is also important. Remembering that CUI does not, by definition, have a foreign national restriction. Now, there are certainly pile-ons that could cause that, but remembering that is important as well. I think we get a lot of frameworks mishmashed together and over-comply. So over-compliance is what hinders things. So that's really what's important is understanding the scope of what the compliance is and applying it appropriately.
I think you nailed it when you said the over compliance thing, because there is an industry out there of like overcomplicated things and using a little bit of fear to have excessive effort put into compliance, which is probably counterproductive to the academic freedom and the ultimate goal of having cutting edge research. Again, we strive for trying to make things simple, always simplify things, and in the context of what we do is, again, make collaboration easier through free accounts and so forth. Laura, we're coming to the end of the time for this session. It's been a delight to have you, to have your expertise and your experience available to your peers over here. I'd like to thank you. I'd like to thank the University of Cincinnati for the efforts that you're undertaking and for making this a significant part of your future endeavors. So thanks so very much.